Hello, welcome back, or I guess I could maybe say welcome to the Call in the Field Stands podcast. This is our episode number 1. We did put out an intro. Hopefully you guys listened to that and got interested, and now here you are for episode 1. But if not, it's the first time you're hearing our voices. I'm Ryan Denchev, joined here by Jeff Mapis.
What's up, guys? Glad to be here, Ryan.
Yes.
Glad we're finally getting this show on the road with episode 1.
Yes, we've been talking about doing a podcast for quite some time. As I pour my home-brewed beer here, Jeff's got some of it as well. We've been talking about it for a long time. Just something that we've really been interested in, just doing, being able to just kind of shoot the shit a little bit and just put it out there. As we mentioned in our intro, if you guys haven't heard that, we're basically more or less sick of the nonsensical takes that we hear from the national media and, otherwise. So we're going to kind of try to do our own thing, get our own opinions out there. Hopefully you guys find it interesting and maybe, get engaged with social media and the like as well. So for today's episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about college football. We're going to recap week 1 a little bit. And then the bulk of it's more or less going to be speaking about our conference picks from the Big 5 conferences, kind of our takes on, who we see doing well, who we ultimately think is going to win those conferences. We're going to get our Final Four predictions, championship predicts, and get into a little bit of NFL. Had some big news break. Today is the 4th. Ezekiel Elliott this morning signed a monstrous running back contract. We'll get into that a little bit. I guess starting off, let's just jump right into a little bit of college football. So, Jeff, what did you kind of see from week 1? I didn't really get a chance to watch too much college live. I had a wedding to attend, so I had to travel a little bit for that. So I got to watch, the first quarter and little into the second of the Buckeyes game. And that's another thing that you guys your listeners will quickly come to find. Myself, Ryan here, is a huge Ohio State fan. Jeff across the table from me right now is a Michigan fan through and through.
Go Blue.
So we're going to have a little bit of heated arguments and battles and discussions, I'm sure, as the podcast progresses, especially as we get closer to, what is that, November 20-something, whatever that.
Toward the end.
Yeah, whatever
30th,
that.
Maybe.
Yeah, whatever that little interesting game that seems to ruffle some feathers and rile people up a little bit. So that'll be fun as we get closer to that. So Jeff, what did you see from week 1? What kind of stood out to you? Any surprises or otherwise? What did you kind of see?
I want to start with what really stood out to me. I get involved with some college football message boards, interact with Michigan ones primarily, but I enjoy reading what fans have to post, especially disgruntled ones, even though their team looked all right in week 1.
They get all flipped out because something crazy happens.
Love the week 1 overreactions. They're hilarious.
Lay them on me.
They're just, Michigan State, for example, we'll get into talking about details of their team. They've got a loaded defense. Their offense, we knew coming into the year, they had question marks. So, I've got this Michigan fan on a message board saying that he claims he predicted they were going to be an 8-win team. Now he's changing it to like 5-7 after week 1. We learned nothing.
Bro,
from
MSU's
week 1.
Going to have a nice season. What the hell is he talking about?
So, we'll get into Michigan State, but that's one example.
Yeah.
I know Michigan fans are freaking out about, some of the sloppy mistakes.
Hey, it's week 1. What are you going to do? Same thing with Ohio State. They just throttled from the beginning, 4 touchdowns in the first 6.5 minutes or something.
It was fast, all in the first quarter.
Yeah, I think
28-0.
They had 4 touchdowns and their total time of possession was a little over 2 minutes, something like that.
They scored fast.
It was absurd.
They were big plays.
But then they didn't do shit for the rest of the game.
Ohio State is another good example of week 1. Do we really know anything new about Justin Fields than what we already knew in the preseason? He's an elite athlete at quarterback, so he can run. And, he took a read option to the house.
He did.
Probably over 50 yards.
Didn't get touched.
No, he took off.
That's kind of the same thing. Like, I get where some, I heard some fans get upset and, some buddies that I had when we had our fantasy football draft the other day talking about, and like I said, I only saw really the first quarter, more or less, and they looked phenomenal. So it's like, okay, they had, even into the second quarter, they had a total of negative yards allowed on defense or some nonsense like that. Florida
I mean,
Atlantic had like minus 20 yards in the first half.
FAU is bad. A lot of these week one opponents for Power 5, they're bad. I mean, the coaches for a team like Ohio State, Michigan, they treat it like a scrimmage. So they might not even make some of the play calls or clock management decisions they would in a meaningful game, just to test the waters, see what works with some of their young players on the field, new starters, kind of put some pressure on them in a live game situation where it doesn't matter. You're going to win. Right. So, let's experiment. Let's see what we can do.
That's kind of what I saw, like what I mentioned, some of my buddies and such, given these takes about how they look like shit. It was a shitty win. They only won, by a few touchdowns against a garbage team. They got outscored in the second half. But, I mean, they played a base defense, from my understanding, the whole game, from the little highlights and review that I watched and the things that I've read. So they didn't really show anything. They barely played any nickel. They didn't do really any innovative stuff on offense, knowing that you got Cincinnati coming back week 2 with Luke Fickell and all that kind of stuff. You throttle them early. You cruise to the end. You don't show too much. You keep your guys healthy. I don't understand why people are so worried about these week 1 matchups that are just basically scrimmage practices. Against teams that have absolutely no shot.
Even if Ohio State won 70-0, that literally does not change my opinion about them coming into the season. We all know the talent they have. I mean, it's whether they win 50-0, 70-0, what do they, I think they scored like 45 points. It was 45-21 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, look at Alabama, probably the most talented team in the nation.
They struggled with Duke.
And they scored 0 points in the first quarter and didn't score an offensive point until, 20-something minutes into the game. And they won by an excessive amount of points.
Yeah.
And nobody gives a shit about what happened because everybody knows Duke is garbage and Alabama's going to be awesome. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, it shouldn't affect many people's opinions.
I guess with that being said, let's kind of jump right into our conference picks. Starting off with the Pac-12.
The most boring conference.
Right.
First.
I was going to mention, you kind of said, let's go from boring to least boring. We'll end with the Big Ten, as we're both fans of teams in that conference. But personally, I thought the ACC was a little bit more boring. I think my opinion there will become evident once we talk about it in the quick conversation that is going to be us both picking Clemson, I'm sure. But let's jump into the Pac-12. I actually thought this was a little bit tough. One of my tougher decisions in all the conferences. I got Oregon and I got Washington, and I'm really struggling to decide who I want to go with. Justin Herbert, 6'6", 240, cannon arm. Dude is a beast. He's in a conversation, in my opinion, as one of the best QBs in the nation with Lawrence and Fromm. But I just don't know if their defense is going to be strong enough, as we kind of saw towards the end of that Auburn game. I thought they had a chance to, really set the tone for the season with that win. Obviously, it won't count towards their conference final standings, but they kind of crumbled, giving up 14 points late. That final touchdown that kind of sealed it with inside of 30 seconds or something like that. And they do have a tough schedule. We mentioned Auburn. They got at Stanford, at Washington, at USC, which, like kind of mentioned, is going to be a cake game. I don't really think it's going to be too much of a struggle, even though it's on the road. They do have Washington State at home, and they don't play Utah, which Washington does, which is kind of why I was kind of leaning towards going with Oregon. But, Washington, another point towards Oregon is they lost 12 starters, 9 of which on defense. But they do always have a strong defense. They always recruit well there. Got good returning receivers led by Aaron Fuller, who, I had to look it up, got 4 catches, 73 yards, and 2 tuds in week 1. They always got a strong O-line, quarterback play. What is this? Jacob Eason guy, transfer from a couple years ago. I think he got injured, and Jake Fromm kind of took over there in Georgia. He should be solid. Got a decent backfield. It's really tough for me to make a decision on Washington or Oregon, but fuck it, I'm going to go with Oregon because I like them more.
Yeah, I struggle with the same matchup there in the Pac-12. I went back and forth.
And another point, Washington does have a little easier schedule. I think they got, USC, Oregon, Utah, Washington State all at home. So
yeah, they have a fairly easy schedule. The thing with Oregon for me, I'm trying to not let week 1 truly finalize my judgment, but I just feel like with Oregon, I need to see them prove themselves in the big moment now. So I did not pick Oregon. I picked Washington.
Gotcha.
Something that concerns me, but it's the Pac-12. Other than and even Oregon. I mean, how many explosive offenses are there in the Pac-12 right now? They only return 2 starters on defense. I don't know. So that kind of is a concern. But
yeah, that's a concern. But I mean, they always recruit. I mean, they always have a strong D, especially in that conference.
I like what Chris Peterson has done. I trust him. I like Jacob Brissett and his potential at quarterback. So coming out of the North, I took Washington. So, picking Utah out of the South, I just, the Pac-12, my personal opinion is it's the most boring. We talked about USC losing JT Daniels. That's a huge blow. They always have to play Notre Dame on their regular schedule. Clay Helton might be up against the fire here. Arizona State.
Yeah, that was a popular pick a little bit.
I like Eno Benjamin, their running back. Of course, Michigan recruited him for a while, so I'm a little more familiar with him, but he's one of the better running backs in the country. But just reading into Utah, I mean, they've got their quarterback, Tyler Huntley, back. Zach Moss returns, both upperclassmen. They've got 3 returning starters on that offensive line. And, that defense also returns 7 starters, and they're typically one of the better teams defensively in the country.
Yeah,
they always produce a solid unit.
Yeah, I had Utah coming out as well from the South there. I think it's their experience is going to put them over the top. They got Jalen Johnson, cornerback, who is a stud, and 14 returning starters. And with the exception of Washington on the road, their schedule isn't all that tough. So I'll go Utah, and then, like I said, just because why not Oregon over Utah? Let's go.
Oregon over Utah. I'm going Utah over Washington for my Pac-12 championship.
Okay.
I think Utah's getting it done. Not picking them for the playoffs. We'll get to those, but I do think Utah's coming out of the Pac-12 as champions. Now, Stanford is interesting. They've recruited very well on the offensive line for being Stanford. Couple classes back, they got 2 5-star offensive linemen. KJ Costello is a really solid quarterback. David Shaw, I think very highly of. He's done very well at Stanford. So they're always a well-coached team, physical, very capable of going on the road and pulling off an upset. You never know what you're going to get with Stanford when you're playing them at home. So they're kind of a wild card, but I think I feel pretty good about my Utah pick coming out of Pac-12.
Gotcha. And moving on to my personal most boringest conference, the OACC. Well, I guess I'll go first. Clemson. Don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I think it's pretty obvious.
What's funny is, they have the actual names for their divisions, Coastal and Atlantic. Clemson is in the Atlantic, and for Coastal on my notes here, I literally put, I don't even know where to begin, and the pick doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's all Clemson.
Yeah. I literally just picked Clemson and didn't really give too much attention to who was going to. I mean, probably Miami, I guess.
It could be. Their offensive line looked so
awful.
Bad on that Thursday game versus Florida.
Awful. I know Florida's got a nice defense, but oh my God. It was bad.
It was bad. And,
especially in that second half and in the fourth quarter, most especially, they could not. I knew they had no. I mean, Florida tried to get them back in the game. Did you watch any of that?
For sure. Oh, yeah. Florida
they tried
gave
their damnedest to
ample
lose that game.
Yeah.
A couple pass interferences, all that kind of stuff. And then their offensive line could not do anything.
So, yeah.
But probably still Miami. I don't know.
It could be Miami.
I didn't give too much thought to it because I think it's just so obviously Clemson.
Right. Exactly. I mean, Louisville didn't look half bad against Notre Dame to start.
Louisville's going to be garbage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and then you got the Atlantic Division Conference of the joke schedule that Clemson gets to face.
their toughest game
They got
is
Texas
easily
A&M.
A&M here coming up.
Yeah,
week
right
2.
now.
Now they had an interesting game with Syracuse.
Yeah, I was gonna say
last
Syracuse
year.
is looking strong.
They,
Look,
they're
like they could be something as we go into this season as well. But they do face Clemson week 3, and they're probably gonna get slapped, and they're probably gonna
most likely
dissolve into irrelevancy for the rest of the season.
So I will give a shout out, hitting on another team before we come back to Clemson. Again, another Michigan recruit, so I'm a little biased toward him, but he's proven to be a very quality running back, is A.J. Dillon for Boston College. Huge power back, very fun to watch going into his junior season. Definitely pegging him to be all ACC running back. Obviously, they picked 2 running backs, so I think he's going to be one of them. But back to Clemson. I mean, that offense is just ridiculously loaded. We could hit on the skilled position players, but they get 3 starters back on the O-line, and they're starting former 5-star Jackson Carman as a redshirt freshman. He looks monstrous on the field watching him in week 1. And obviously, Travis Etienne. I was watching the playoff and national championship recap on ESPNU recently, and he scored a touchdown in that title game, and the announcer made a comment that that was his 26th touchdown of the season during the game. I wasn't even aware that was an actual stat, and then here this announcer is making that claim. So he's one of the more talented speedbacks in the country. Trevor Lawrence is going to come out of college and be the highest graded prospect at quarterback, since you're Andrew Luck, since you're
maybe
Manning.
ever, honestly.
I mean,
maybe ever.
And it could be ever. It could be better than those two. He's 6'6", big guy, and he's got a quick release and a cannon. I mean,
he came in last year
as a freshman and took down Alabama,
which was absurd. T. Higgins, don't forget about him, dog.
Justin Ross, T. Higgins, Amari Rodgers. I mean, there's just stacked at receiver. Justin Ross last year on the same possession made 2 one-handed catches against Alabama. I mean, It's just insane.
They're too good. But I guess we can kind of wrap that up in the ACC. Probably talk a little bit longer than we should have there because could have just said Clemson and moved straight on.
Pretty much.
But let's go to the Big 12, I think. I'll let you take the lead on this. I got an interesting selection, I think. You see some people picking them, but let's see what you have.
So
Big 12.
Big 12, they don't have divisions. They take the 2 best record teams and they play again. That's why Texas had to rematch Oklahoma last year and eventually lost to Oklahoma. Not easy to beat a team twice in the same year, especially in college football. It's just very difficult to do. So my top 2 teams are those 2 teams we just mentioned.
Me too.
I think they're pretty easy choice for the top 2.
Yeah.
Whoever you pick may be debatable. Just to hit on both teams before we let Ryan speak here, and then we pick our champions. Oklahoma has Lincoln Riley. He's probably the most creative offensive mind in the game of football right now. I mean, past 2 quarterbacks have won Heisman trophies.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't but a year ago, I'd say, when you and I, as Browns fans, were really harping on bringing Lincoln Riley in to take over the offense and really coach Baker Mayfield and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that would have been sweet.
It would have been interesting.
Hugh Jackson instead for Baker's rookie year.
Yeah. He lasted, 7-8 weeks, and was getting the ball handed to him after, I think it was Demarius Randall picks off the Bengals.
That was awesome.
The greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, sorry.
That's my background picture on Facebook. Handing the football to Hugh Jackson is classic. But so they get the transfer Jalen Hurts.
Bald, bro.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns in week 1.
Wow.
3 passing, 3 rushing. I mean, just insane.
Where did that come from? I know he did his thing a little bit in Alabama, but Jesus Christ.
He's got legs and his arm is respectable enough, especially in an offense like Lincoln Riley's. Yeah. It's going to generate open receivers, and he's going to hit them.
Yeah.
So, you got Hurts, very dynamic quarterback, plus another underrated quality about him. He's a leader for Alabama. So now you're getting an upperclassman transfer quarterback who is well respected. He came in for Tua when he went down and won against Georgia in the SEC title game.
Yeah, even as he got, stepped aside and Tua came in, he still was that main guy, that leader of that team that everybody kind of looked to on that offense, even though he wasn't on the field. And to be a guy who's not in the game, who's leading a team, I think that really says something to who he is and what he brings to the table.
So that offense has it going on. I mean, they got CeeDee Lamb. He's an NFL prospect at receiver. Oklahoma's been one of those teams that just shits out quality offensive line units. Their running backs are loaded. Sermon, Kennedy Brooks, TJ Pledger. I mean, they're one of the best running back groups in the country. Oklahoma has a freshman, Jaden Hazelwood, going to be a stud receiver. They've got a freshman 5-star quarterback as well, Spencer Rattler. That offense is well loaded for years to come. But the big question, obviously, with Oklahoma, what the hell are they doing on defense? Is it going to improve?
It is the Big 12.
Exactly. But, they win the Big 12. There's a whole nother animal they have to get over in the playoffs, whether they meet Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, whoever it is, they're not going to be able to stop them. So,
Ohio State.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of take a little bit and talk a little bit about Texas. My boy Tom Hermy. Good old Herman up there and the boys. Sam, how do you say his name? Ellinger?
Yeah.
So this dude, man, I think he's legitimate. I took notice of this dude last year, USC game. And you look at his stats, they weren't all that super impressive, but to me, I saw him ball out. I was actually out at a casino at a gun show thing that raises money for a fire department down in West Virginia with my pops and I. Getting rip shit drunk, you know how it goes. So I'm watching this game, and the dude is just a freshman balling out on USC, and I'm like, this dude is for real. So I kind of started taking notice of him. That WVU game was the game of the year.
That game was insane.
Wild. The man showed out there too. He really just had a great season, and I think he's going to produce similar numbers again this year. You got some guys gone to the league though. How do you say the dude's name? Lil Jordan Humphrey?
Yep.
Hell of a name, first of all.
Hell of a name. So, you got 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns there. And Colin Johnson with another 985 and 7 touchdowns coming. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you got as your pick? You kind of covered all the points on Oklahoma. Your boy's picking Texas. Yeah, Texas had some grad transfers to shore up that O-line this year, and they were a couple good ones. Keontae Ingram, I liked as a recruit out of high school at running back.
708 yards last year, I think I put down. Another 169 at receiving, 5 total touchdowns.
Like I said, really liked him out of high school. Think he's going to be a good running back. I just don't see it overcoming Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think they'll probably lose. They do play the regular season. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I think, like you mentioned, they'll rematch, and beating a team twice is a difficult task.
It makes it
and
a
I
tough
think
pick.
Texas is going to pull it out this year. I guess we'll wait and see if I pick them for my Final Four. But that's going to be an interesting matchup going in that conference championship game. So moving on, SEC. This will be interesting to hear what you have to say. We got the likes of Alabama, we got the likes of Georgia. Those will probably lead our conversation in our picks for that matchup for the championship. But I'll let you go first and lead off with your SEC pick.
Obviously, the West has typically always been one of the most loaded divisions in college football, and SEC top to bottom typically produces the most NFL athletes in the draft. So on the West, obviously Bama is at the top. At Texas A&M, I like Jimbo Fisher when it comes to results on the field. The dude can coach and produce wins. Kellen Mond at QB is a very interesting prospect. Their schedule is brutal. Texas A&M has to play on the road at Clemson. They get Bama at home. Then to end the season in consecutive weeks, they go on the road to Georgia and on the road to LSU. That's how they end their season. I don't care how good you are. You're not coming out on top.
Especially when you have the likes of Alabama with the classic Alabama schedule, which is garbage.
Yeah. Speaking of that, if you look at past Alabama schedules, their schedules get set up perfectly, especially with their bye weeks. Before
how does this motherfucker get a bye week before every
the
biggest
SEC
game besides Auburn?
Typically LSU. He's had multiple byes.
Guess what? He's got the week before LSU this week. A bye week.
That's
again.
crazy.
LSU actually does also have a bye week this year as well.
Well, that's good.
Should match up.
No, I have noticed that trend.
Oh yeah.
I've also noticed Alabama.
It's absurd.
Alabama gets. They schedule these Power 5 non-conference games, but look who they played this year. They play like Duke,
New Mexico State.
They played Michigan when they were down. Like they played Penn State the 2 previous years before Michigan. We're talking about teams that like come across. Yeah, they're not the MAC, but they are no match for Alabama. The best team they opened up with non-conference was actually Florida State before the wheels fell off and Francois got injured in that game. But, I mentioned recruiting rankings earlier for Florida State. They typically get a lot of athletes, and they get close to Alabama's level of athletes. Close, not quite there. So it made sense that just week 1 going toe-to-toe, they kind of took it to them. Alabama's defense was a little swarming that game. But anywho.
Yeah, I just don't get how
it's crazy.
Their non-conference games are so trash. Like you see these other teams playing good. I mean, Ohio State had that series with TCU. Michigan plays Notre Dame a lot. Like you got these non-conference games that are actually relevant, and then you get Alabama year after year playing the likes of Duke, SMU, New Mexico State, who they got all this year. It's like blows my mind. I mean, good for Nick Saban. I mean, he's got a good thing going. Win 2 good games a year and go to the finals, even if you lose one of them.
It makes me think, why did Michigan even put Notre Dame on the schedule if we want to make the playoffs? Yeah. Why even go down that road?
If you beat them, it doesn't really mean that much, probably because Notre Dame doesn't look all that great towards the end. And if you lose, well, then you're fucked.
It just varies by year. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is an interesting trend with Alabama's schedule. But
yeah, so one thing that I've been hearing, speaking on Alabama, everyone, and I think Herb Street has even mentioned it a little bit, who one of the talking heads who I actually enjoy listening to is Herbie. That man is a wise man, and he's got good shit going. But he talked about, I think it was him, he talked about he thinks Alabama is going to come out and start throttling people because they got embarrassed so badly in the championship. I don't really see that being, I don't really buy into that. But with that being said, they still have Tua, who obviously is probably going to be the first round pick or first overall pick to the Dolphins. Whether or not I think he's going to pan out in the NFL is another thing. But Jerry Jeudy, that dude is legit. He'll probably go top 10, if not top 5.
Let's hit on Jerry Jeudy in week 1 versus Duke. Did you see? There were 2 main catches that kind of
I didn't really pay attention to the highlights of that Duke game, to be honest.
Dude, we gotta pull him up eventually, because the first one, he kind of did a little hook route toward the center of the field, catches the ball, sees a defender behind him, kind of starts running back toward the line of scrimmage, and does a spin move toward that direction. It was literally like a video game where you hit the B button and you're anticipating your player spinning one direction, but he spins the opposite direction and backwards. So you're like, oh, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
But sometimes in the video game, it actually works, and you take off down the sideline. Bro, this is exactly what happened. He spun like heading back toward the line, and then when he got his feet, just took off down the sideline for a first down. Another one, another spin move behind the line of scrimmage. He gets the ball. There's a defender between him and the quarterback closing in on him. The defender isn't close enough to make a tackle, but he does a spin move, and it kind of freezes the defender a little bit and just freaking takes off to the end zone this time. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, he's a freak.
He's a total freak. Total freak.
He'll go, like I said, top 10 for sure, if not top 5. He's the real deal. I mean, well, I guess you don't want to forget about Najee Harris, who is a monstrous man.
Yeah, he is. He is.
I always
huge.
get these giant running backs.
It's crazy.
Just beasts of human beings.
If you guys want a funny video of a high school prospect, watch Derrick Henry's high school highlights his senior year. He looks like a defensive end taking the handoff and
Maurice
just housing.
Claret-esque.
I mean, it's hilarious.
Dude, Maurice Claret was a bowling ball back in high school.
He's all right.
But I mean, defensively stacked. Per use, Trevor Diggs, another top 10 pick probably. Trell Lewis, Raekwon Davis is a stud. Lost Dylan Moses, but I really don't think it's going to matter all that much. He is a stud. He is, first rounder probably, barring the injury. But ultimately, their defense is stacked, and
they're stacked every year.
They're gonna,
let's be honest, they're getting
cruise
the best
to
of the
the
best
conference
athletes
championship
every single year.
So yeah, I mean, they're probably the most talented team in the country with a cake schedule. So I think it's pretty easy to say they're going to walk to the conference championship.
What do you think of LSU? Your boy Joey Burrow down there.
Dude, I have no faith in LSU.
Yeah.
I got no faith in LSU.
Ed Orgeron, I mean, he's good enough to get you, 10 wins a season. But let's face it, he's going up against one of the best dynasties of all time, if not the best, in Alabama. And it's just not going to happen.
I had no faith in them last year, and I have no faith in them again this year.
Now, they got a lot of good players.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're a good team.
Grant Delpit, probably the best safety in the country. Stingley will be a high-level corner. Rashard Lawrence on the D-line. It's a menace, but they're just going to fall short to Alabama. Yeah. It's just going to happen.
So, I mean, if I was a gambling man, which I am, I'd probably say that you're going to pick Georgia to face off against Alabama. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
So I have a good friend who is kind of – Georgia isn't his favorite team, but like you and I, big sports fan, likes following as many sports as he can, and he's kind of fond of Georgia. When like a couple of years back, he started taking notice to how much talent they were getting there, and he kind of picked them up after Kirby Smart got hired. So he was at the Vanderbilt Georgia game, and he got to go on the field. And he said Georgia's offensive line is the biggest offensive line unit he's ever seen in person. Like Alabama, I mean, they're just loaded on both fronts. They continuously produce those NFL bodies that NFL teams just drool about. So I like Jake Fromm. I think he's a high-level quarterback that doesn't get enough credit that I think he
Jake
deserves.
Fromm, in my opinion, is legit.
I think he's very legit. Tua and Trevor Lawrence understandably get a lot of hype. I think Fromm gets overlooked sometimes. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be successful in the NFL as well. Running backs, there might not be a more talented running back group in the country. DeAndre Swift is my favorite running back to watch. He is absolutely nasty.
Dude, they recruit some RBs. Let me tell you.
They shit them out. They shit out these stud freak running backs. It's insane. They got James Cook, Zamir White, former 5-star. I've seen pictures of these guys in practice. My God, I mean they just look the part. You look at these athletes, they look the part. I've got Bama versus Georgia in the SEC championship.
Yeah, I do as well. And going back on Jake Fromm, and kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier when I talked about Tua. I think, in my opinion, when I look at next year's draft, my highest rated QB is probably going to be Jake Fromm. You got some other guys in the mix, but I think he's going to be my pick. I mean, Tua's going to go number 1 to the Dolphins when they lose every single game, but that's
going to be a bad situation.
Yeah,
because it's just so tough to grade Alabama sometimes. He's clearly the best quarterback Nick Saban has ever had, which makes them extremely scary on the field. Sure. But when I heard a stat over the radio, when he faced top 30 defenses, his QBR dropped. You saw what he did against Georgia in the SEC title game. When he got under duress and felt the pressure, he wasn't, the typical 2-0 we saw, ended up getting hurt, came out of the game. Then versus Clemson, they disguised man coverage, and got to him early. I mean, there was a pick six, first possession of the game. Clemson went up 7-0. And he threw a later pick in the game as well. So I think if he got drafted by an NFL team that had weapons already in place for him to throw to, that's when he'll be successful. But like you, I'm a little, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be able to carry a desperate NFL franchise like the Miami Dolphins, who might not win a single game this year.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, who you got? Alabama, Georgia, conference ship.
This was tough for me because I kind of think I really want to say Georgia is getting it done this year, but I can't pull the trigger. I'm going Saban in the clutch again in the SEC title game, winning and punching his ticket to the playoff yet again.
Gotcha. So for me, much like that Pac-12 pick, I'm going Georgia just because fuck it, why not?
Fuck it, why not?
I mean, like we kind of even just mentioned, they're both super talented teams. And I mean, Georgia can do it. I think Alabama loses and still goes to the finals anyways, but I think just to go out on a limb, I'll go Georgia.
Georgia can do it for sure.
Fromm is going to show why he should be the number one pick and not Tua, and they're going to pull it out and then probably face off.
What makes me a little nervous, yes, Fromm is a high-level quarterback. They lost Howman to suspension this year, had a little bit of off-field issues. He was their best receiver returning. Now, granted, Georgia is right at the top with Alabama in recruiting every year. They get stud athletes. It just is what it is. I just can't. I think Bama is still a little too talented.
I mean, they are the more talented team, but
by a thin margin. I'm not saying it's by much.
Most talented team sometimes doesn't win.
That's true. That's true.
All right, so let's jump into the Big Ten. I think we're gonna be able to get into a little bit. Being Ohio State, being Michigan, that's kind of the conferences that we pay most attention to, being fans of those two teams. Let's see what you have to say on the old Big Ten.
Well, we can both start with the boring division, the West.
Yeah.
I don't even know who to pick. I mean, Northwestern can be decent this year. Wisconsin always produces quality offensive line units, and Jonathan Taylor might be the best running back in the country. Probably is. The most intriguing team in the West is Nebraska, year 2 under Scott Frost.
Nebraska. Okay.
I think very highly of Scott Frost. I think maybe not this year, but the following year, year 3, Nebraska is going to be coming out of the West.
Personally, I went Iowa coming out of the West. They do have some tough games, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, like you had just mentioned. I kind of went Iowa. If they could beat Penn State at home on October 12th, I think that sets them up for a nice run in the West. But Wisconsin is still looming, I guess, as you say.
Yeah, I'm going Wisconsin again.
Yeah.
I guess I trust them most in the West.
Yeah, they
typically. So
Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Iowa all at home. And I don't know. I think I'm just gonna go lean towards Iowa. Just another one of those fucking picks, I think. But AJ Epinesa is a stud. He kind of
10.5 sacks last year.
Oh yeah.
Beast.
Oh yeah, he'll be a force again. The defense as a whole is strong. I think looking at the stats, Epinesa got slowed down a little bit week 1, but I think he's just gonna pull some of those double teams, even triple teams at times, and he's going to allow the rest of the defense to kind of free up and do some special things. Nate Stanley, what you think about him? I like Nate Stanley.
To be honest, don't know much about him.
I like Nate Stanley. He's got some weapons to play with. He did lose, 2 tight ends in the first round, which
is crazy.
Yeah, which is
how does that even happen?
Whether or not they both should have gone in the first round. I don't know. I guess that's yet to be seen.
Sorry, Lions fans.
He's got a couple receivers, running backs returning. I like that Sargent kid. He kind of balled out last week with 14 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Added 65 more receiving yards. Had a nice screen pass that went pretty well. And then this Emar Smith Marset, if I'm saying his name correctly, and Brandon Smith. They should do pretty well this year as well. They each had touchdowns. I'm just going to go Iowa. I'm not really have a lot of faith in Wisconsin. They come and go. I like what Iowa's doing, and I think Nate Stanley's going to be able to lead that team and put up some decent numbers and beat teams he easily should, which I think gets overlooked a lot of times. You always see those teams that are really good that lose to teams that they shouldn't. I think Iowa's going to get past those. They might, if they can win that Penn State game. Like I said, I think it's going to set them up pretty well to, get through the West and face off against the Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes. Actually, Phil Steele is saying they have talking about Iowa. They have 3 all Big Ten caliber DBs.
There you go.
That defense might be a little daunting. And Kinnick Stadium, as we know, very difficult place to play. Yes. They've upset our teams in recent years.
Yes,
late
indeed.
in the season, came down to kill the momentum of the season.
Some of their bigger games, Michigan, Nebraska. You mentioned Northwestern, Wisconsin, all on the road, which is unfortunate.
Yeah,
for
I don't
them,
like
but
that.
They do have that Penn
that.
State game at home, like I said, October 12th. It's going to be a statement game for them, and it's going to really be the make or break for their season, in my opinion. So let's just move on to the old division where we know who has dominated for many a season.
Yeah.
The old Buckeyes. I'm guessing you're not picking Ohio State, and you can guess that I am picking Ohio State. So
yeah, we'll get to my pick.
We'll get to your pick.
We'll get to my pick here. Big Ten East. Penn State, I think, has some young athletes. Just not going to be as explosive without McSorley.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's their year.
Right?
Yeah, Miles Sanders. Yeah. Lost him, drafted by the Eagles, I believe. Michigan State, coming into the season, they have questions on offense. Brian Lewerke has battled injuries his career. Who knows if those injuries are still haunting him. Their offensive line is atrocious. They better hope they get it figured out as they get into Big Ten play. To me, that's their big holdup because that defense is going to be something fierce. Wilkes is an All-American type defensive end. I mean, they're going to field a special defense this year. So if they don't want to hold that defense back, they better get their offensive line sorted out. To me, when you go up against the big boys, if you don't have an offensive line to protect your quarterback and give him time for plays to develop, you're not going to win big. I'm thinking Michigan State is third in the East right now. And then we can go right along to Michigan, my team. Big year for Jim Harbaugh, obviously, in year 5. Hasn't exactly lived up to expectations.
Yeah, I'd say that's putting it a little mildly.
Look, he was hired to be the equalizer in the rivalry against Ohio State. And he has not done that. And to be quite honest, in every single big game each season, not every big game, but for the most part, he has fallen short in those big games, whether we can't close late in the game, like 2016 OSU, Florida State that same year in the Orange Bowl. We give up a huge return late on a missed tackle that puts Florida State in position to get the go-ahead touchdown. It's an interesting year because he's 0-4 against Ohio State, and that's what you should be judged on primarily at Michigan, beating your rival. And then he's got a senior quarterback returning. We might have found a special running back in Zach Charbonnet. It's week 1, true freshman. Let's see what he's got. He's a highly sought-after recruit. We returned Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins. Tariq Black is finally healthy. That receiving core right there is good enough to be top 5 in the country in that position unit.
Peoples-Jones is nice.
Dude, he's awesome. We returned 4 starting offensive linemen. I can't remember the last time and actually quality offensive linemen. They all at least got honorable mention all Big Ten last year. They're all upperclassmen. We started a redshirt freshman against Middle Tennessee at left tackle. Since Runyon is out, he looked good. I've got a lot of questions about the defense, particularly our interior D-line. But overall, huge year for Jim. It's time to put up or shut up. You've had 4 recruiting classes to address personnel issues. You've had 4 years leading up to now to address your coaching staff issues. Ohio State has never had more uncertainty entering a season than this year, with a new coach, 4 new offensive lineman starters, a transfer quarterback starting. Not saying they're not good. That's not what I'm getting at. But you got Ohio State at home. If you can't get it done this year, what are we talking about?
4 years, like I get what you're saying. Easily the most question marks, and I'll get into that a little bit. But before, we talked about coaches on the hot seat. Are we putting Harbaugh on that seat or what?
I don't want to say he's on the hot seat. Michigan's in a tight spot. We're coming from literally the bottom of bottoms with Rich Rod and Brady Hoke. Mind you, simultaneously, Ohio State is going from Jim Tressel, who bent over the Big Ten, went to multiple national championships, won one. Then they go from that to Urban Meyer, who won 90% of his games and went undefeated against, first 24 games at Ohio State, 24-0.
Yep.
Didn't lose a game. So you're going from where Michigan is absolute rock bottom, worst back-to-back eras in football, to Ohio State, probably the best back-to-back eras in their history of coaches. It's unheard of to go from a coach like Jim Tressel to Urban Meyer. So, they're in a hard place. If he wins 11 games and his one loss is to Ohio State, you're going to fire an 11-1. Who are you going to get that can go 11-1, average 10 wins a year, average top 10 recruiting roundabout?
Yeah.
It's a tough decision. I
wouldn't fire him.
My knee-jerk reaction would be 0-5 against Ohio State is atrocious. Get the hell out of here. We need to do better. But at the same time, it's tough because if you
start over again, and if you miss on your next coach and allow Ryan Day to explode, you're pretty well screwed. And you're looking at potentially 3 decades of losing football to Ohio State. Yeah, no surprise here. I'm going Ohio State. I'll try to run through it quick. J.K. Dobbins, stud. I think they'll lean on him a lot. He balled out with Mike Weber as the main guy in the last couple of years. He'll probably go first round. Justin Fields, we mentioned. I won't really talk too much about him, but he's just a stud as well. O-line should be solid. Luke Farrell at tight end had a nice game against the shitty FAU. Wide receivers looking pretty solid, man. KJ Hill is a stud. Benjamin Victor.
He's underrated, by the way.
Dude,
Hill.
for sure.
I think he's underappreciated.
Yeah, he's a Terry McLaurin 2.0, except more athletic, I think. Benjamin Victor, another athletic, acrobatic dude who can make some catches. Austin Mack. Chris Olave is a guy who I think is going to really break out. He had a little bit of a breakout season more or less last year, but I think he's really going to take another step. Garrett Wilson, freak athlete, another incredible potential guy. Defensively, one of the best defensive line, if not in the nation. Chase Young is probably he might go first overall. Well,
he could top 3.
Yeah, it depends on who gets the first overall pick. I think we both agree that it's probably going to be the Dolphins, and they're going to pick Tua or a quarterback. Yeah, but he'll be the first defensive player off the board, just pumping out DNs from Ohio State, bro.
It's pretty absurd.
Pumping them out. 2 of them have the same last name, but hey, pumping them out.
Yeah.
Overall, Browning, overall, depth. I meant Browning. You got Robert Landers, who I think is going to be a force this year as well. Zach Harrison's going to get a little playing time. It's a guy who was, highly recruited, as you mentioned, the recruiting side. He'll get some PT. Ryan Day's already talked about that a little bit. Defensive backs, again, just DBU.
A lot of athletes, man.
DBU.
Jordan Fuller coming back. He's a senior now this year, right?
Yep.
He came back for a senior year.
DBU, man. Jeffrey Okudah is another guy who, is probably going to go top 10, if not higher, in this upcoming draft. He's going to probably join, let's see, Denzel Ward, Marshawn Lattimore, Malik Hooker, Jerrion Conley, Eli Apple, Bradley Roby as first rounders who have come from, or since 2014. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 first rounders since 2014. First round DBs.
No, it's pretty absurd.
It's nonsensical.
Ohio State's back 7 had some difficult times last year during the season. But the elite athletes are there. Talked about Jordan Fuller already. I love Jeffrey Okuda coming out of high school. It just,
he impressed a lot last week. I know, like we mentioned, it's FIU, but more to come from him.
As far as athleticism goes,
probably best corner.
Oh yeah, first round potential.
Top
just
10
raw
pick.
Measurables. Got to see. I like Sean Wade as well.
Yeah, Damon Arnett's another guy who's going to be, solid on the outside there. Linebackers is, I think, where the main question mark comes into play. Pete Warner might be the worst player who's ever suited up as a starter for Ohio State, ever. Dude is garbage. I don't care what anybody says. I don't know how he still has a starting spot, but he's still getting thrown out there. Tuff Borland, he played equally shitty last year. He was battling injury, so hopefully he'll come back strong this year. But, that captain, he better step up because he looked atrocious as well at times last year. Malik Harrison, I think, is going to have a really good season to hopefully round that out. And Browning, I think, is going to step in and, take some reps away from Warner and become a prominent starter on that linebacker core. And, we talked about Chase Young, and I think he's going to be first defensive player off the board and really lead the way from that defense. I mean, you can do whatever you want to try to double him or whatever. It's not really going to much matter. He's going to dominate, and that's why I see them beating Michigan and playing Iowa. Yeah, buddy.
It's funny. I'm going Ohio State.
Okay.
Out of the East. I just I want to pick Michigan. Phil Steele actually, for the first time in 11 years, picked Michigan over Ohio State.
Hey, like you said, this is the year, bro.
Sorry. It's the first time in 11 years he hasn't picked Ohio State.
Oh, gotcha.
And he's picking Michigan to come out of the East this year. I got to see it. Like I said, it's not just Ohio State. In other big games, Jim Harbaugh has either not been able to close or, for example, opening up against Notre Dame last year in prime time, week 1, you're the prime time game. We looked outmatched and outcoached like we didn't belong in the game. Now,
Notre Dame was legit, though.
They were, but we were playing the quarterback that didn't finish the year for them, and not because of injury, because he wasn't as good. Yeah. And, they ended up rattling off 10 wins. But I think for the Michigan fan base, that absolute ass beating that Jim Harbaugh allowed in Columbus last year has really got people a little...
So awesome.
I mean, I thought Don Brown was a pretty solid defensive coordinator, but good Lord.
It was
no adjustments all game. And when he did make an adjustment, we were blowing coverages wide open. Yeah. Dwayne Haskins going to, with his eyes closed, hit wide open receivers for touchdowns. So never been as low as I am now on Michigan's defense and Don Brown.
Yeah, I mean, you had some athletes last year at linebacker, but
Devin Bush, stud.
Freak.
One of the best middle linebackers
Freak
I've
athlete,
watched
but they could
Michigan.
not cover over the middle. Dude, I could have completed
what it was?
30 passes in that
game. We're either in cover 1, cover 0. Penn State did this with Saquon Barkley. I was at the game, watched it all game. We never adjusted. Ohio State did the same thing. Motion running back out of the backfield.
Yep.
That linebacker goes with them all the time. And Ohio State, whether it was from formations or just the way, Michigan aligned up to it, a lot of times was Devin Bush trotting out to the boundary, and they attacked the middle of the field because our playmaker wasn't there anymore. Penn State, when they had Saquon Barkley, motioned him out of the backfield. We had our slowest linebacker follow him out to the boundary. Who do you think they threw to?
Yep.
I mean, it's just asinine.
Just keep doing it till you stop it too. So, so I got Ohio State as well. I mean, that's pretty much our wrap up on our conference picks. There's some more college stuff that we can get into that's not as pressing, I think. I know we did want to talk a little bit about the coaching situation, which is another question mark, in my opinion, from Ohio State. I mean, Ryan Day has been there for a little bit. So I think he will be able to step up and fill those shoes of Urban Meyer. Pulling Larry Johnson in as a co-head coach, I think, goes a long way. But we can get into that, episode 2 perhaps. Let's jump into our top 4 real quick. Who you got as your final 4 playoff and then your champion?
My final 4 is Alabama, Clemson.
As number 1?
Yeah. I mean, number in order: Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma.
Okay. Yeah, I had Clemson number 1 facing Alabama, Ohio State facing Georgia. Like I mentioned, I have Georgia beating Alabama in that conference championship. Alabama, as a one-loss team, still making it to the finals because they don't play any other relevant teams other than LSU and maybe Auburn. Yeah, I guess Texas A&M, I think's on there. But then I have Buckeyes Bama rematch. Buckeyes hoist. Let's go.
What?
You got to pick. You got to. What am I going to say here as a Buckeye fan? Pick them to go to the
That's
the
a
playoff
homer-ass
and
pick.
oh, goddamn right it is. You're goddamn right it is.
You have no shame.
Hey, I mean they're a talented team who could do it. You can't get me wrong on that. Are they the most talented team? Perhaps no, but that doesn't mean shit. Look what happened last time they were the least talented team playing against Alabama. Let's go.
I mean, that sophomore class they had produced 11 draft picks or 10 draft picks, 5 first rounders, something absurd. It set the record in the NFL. I'm going
highest paid wide receiver and highest paid running back in the NFL right now.
Yeah,
came from that team.
They were loaded. I mean,
easiest recruiting tool
on
Ryan
both sides
Day's
of the ball.
ever been handed in his entire life.
He got
Just
the keys.
show up with a picture from every athlete of Mike Thomas in one hand and Zeke Elliott in the other hand and be like, do you want to be this guy?
Right.
And
dude, he got handed the keys of a Ferrari from Urban Meyer.
Yep.
I mean, but no, I'm this might be boring. Going Bama Clemson again in the title game with Bama getting it done.
What else is
Clemson loses one thing we didn't talk about. They lost all 4 starting defensive linemen.
Yeah.
That's great. 3 were taken in the first round, I believe. Correct?
I believe so, yeah.
That's just unheard of. It's unheard of that they could have been drafted that high the previous year, and they all came back for another year to get it done in the national title. I just don't think Oklahoma or Ohio State is going to play that type of offense, for one, all season with Trevor Lawrence and the weapons we named. And then Clemson, they recruit pretty well as well on the defensive side, and Brett Venables is one of the best, if not the best, defense coordinators in the country. So when you combine that offense and defense, I just don't see Oklahoma overcoming that, and I don't see Ohio State beating Bama in those 2 first rounds. I've got Bama over Clemson in the national title.
Gotcha. Word. Well, we'll have to look back on September 4th later in the year and see kind of where this all shakes out.
Make fun of ourselves when we're totally wrong.
Yeah. So, moving on to the NFL. Wanted to get into that a little bit. It is days before the NFL season kicks off with Packers-Bears on Thursday night. Today is, a Wednesday?
It's a Wednesday.
Oh, tomorrow. Shit. Okay. So, we want to jump into a couple of the storylines that broke over the last couple of days. One today being Zeke Elliott. We got to talk about this, of course. 6-year extension, $90 million on top of the 2 years he has left on his current deal, which is about $13 million or so. So in total, he's getting 8 years, $103 million, 13 per year, becoming the highest paid running back in the history of all the times. $45 million guaranteed. Pretty wild for a running back. Do you have an opinion? I believe you do. You've talked about it in the past where it comes to running backs. Lay it on me, Jeffrey.
I actually think running backs don't get a fair stick. Their prime is in their early years. So they should be paid the most in their early years. That's when they get fed the rock more times than not. And let's be honest, Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, you could argue he's been the best running back since he's entered the league in that same time frame. But damn, 8 years locking him up to that type of money. It's pretty insane.
I mean, you got to think about it too. You look at the MLB, for instance. You got guys who come in young through arbitration. They're getting paid nothing for a few years. And then guys like, Miguel Cabrera, they're getting paid on the back end. Zeke's getting paid now for what he's doing now under this rookie contract. Right. In addition to, he's only, 24 years old. And when this contract is done, he'll be 31. I get what you're saying. There's guys, you kind of regress as your years get older. Guys don't put up as big of numbers because you're getting just hammered, especially guys getting fed like Zeke as much as he's going to be. But there are, anomalies. Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore, those guys come to mind of guys who can just carry a load into their 30s.
For sure.
which Zeke is that special talent, in my opinion. He's the best running back in the league. I don't think it's close, in my opinion. He's the best blocking running back that there is in the game, and I don't think that gets a lot of attention paid to it. He's a great receiver out of the backfield. He runs just as good as anybody else. I would pay the man, especially how the Cowboys have their team set up. They have an awesome offensive line. The defense is solid enough, and they're building around the fact that they need a stud running back to kind of carry the load.
It'll probably be their best defense they've fielded in a long time.
And you still got Dak Prescott, who's demanding, latest reports that I've read, $40 million per, which is the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I would never give that dude
his contract is up after this year, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Man. See, that's why I respect the Rams for getting that contract done with Jared Goff while they're similar to Zeke, while there are years left on his contract. So
yeah, but I ain't paying Dak Prescott Jared Goff.
I wouldn't either, man. You know me. I would tank for Trevor Lawrence next year with that line.
That's a lot of tanking, bro. That's a lot of tanking. That's 2 straight tank years.
Not this year. Make Dak play.
So, tank next year.
Next year. Cut it loose.
How are you going to manage that? You still got the stud offensive line. You still got Zeke locked in for forever.
Your
defense is solid. Don't play him. Okay.
But on a serious note, back to Zeke, I had the opinion that you needed to pay him if you're the Cowboys and you want to win now. You've got all this money invested in that offensive line. They actually just restructured Collins' contract. That's a lot of money to be spending on that offensive line. You've got Amari Cooper. You've got Dak, who's whatever. He's an average NFL player.
Guy. They built their team around running back, and they got the best in the league, and you better pay the man. And that's what they did. I think Jerry Jones realized that. I think he got a fair deal. He set himself up for life, and he could blow his knee out tomorrow. He's still getting that 45 in his pocket.
Yep.
I mean, hey, I would have done that deal in a heartbeat as well. Take me back to when I wanted the Browns to draft Zeke and Mike Thomas, and they drafted, I think, Corey Coleman. So that's neither here nor there.
Corey Coleman.
Yeah.
A fucking midget in the first round.
Dude is garbage. He's not even in the league, I don't think, anymore.
Michael Thomas went in the second round. It's just...
it blows my mind.
It's crazy.
But I mean, going back on my point about, guys who were able to do good things in their later seasons. And, I think the Cowboys kind of have it set up almost like when they had Emmitt Smith. They built around that running back position. Troy Aikman's the most overrated quarterback in the Hall of Fame. Most overrated quarterback of all time, in my opinion. He's not that good. But Zeke is a special guy who can put up numbers late in his career, and I think they made the right decision by paying him.
I like having a special running back on my team. That's what I would prefer. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Now let me ask you this. Can the Cowboys win a Super Bowl with this formula they have in place?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, as long as Dak can be Nick Foles, I mean, that man just won a Super Bowl. I mean, he kind of carried. Their offense wasn't anything special. They kind of leaned on their defense, but
they had a lot of skilled guys to throw. Like the Eagles didn't have that stud receiver like a Julio Jones type. Okay, not that bona fide number one superstar receiver or that bona fide superstar running back, but they consistently ranked toward the top on their offensive line. They had really good skilled players, and that defense, was nasty.
So, could they win a Super Bowl? Yeah, sure. I don't see why not. The NFC isn't all that strong. You got the Saints, the Rams, I think.
Decent amount of good teams.
Yeah, the Rams and the Saints. I don't really – who else is really going to be –
I struggled to pick playoff teams in
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. But, yeah, I think they could. Whether or not, I don't think it's really going to be this year. It may or may not be. They're going to have a hard time doing it. Dak, I think, is going to – I'll be surprised if Dak wins the Super Bowl. But could he if all the pieces fall into place?
What about Garrett, their head coach? What do you think about him?
He does all right.
He's not the worst.
He's not the worst. He's not going to, light any crazy balls on fire of the greatest coaches that are out there. He's not a Belichick or what have you, but he's good enough.
We'll see.
Yeah, I think he's fine. He's proven to be competent, I guess. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I really don't think, in my opinion, that coaches are all that important. You need players to ball out and play. And, I think we've had anomalies with guys like Belichick who think, he wins 6 Super Bowls, whatever it is now. It's not.
You really need it all.
Yeah, well,
you need quality coaching. You need quality QB play. I mean, you really need to have a nice collection of talent at every level on both sides of the ball, and you need to have quality coaching.
Yeah, quality coaching. I think Garrett can provide quality coaching. I mean, is Doug Peterson the greatest coach to ever coach?
No.
He's a young coach who got it done. I mean, everyone talks about Sean McVay being the second coming. Dude's another young coach who is good enough to get it done. I mean, Garrett can get it done if he leans on the right guys. I mean, they got Zeke locked in. Obviously, that's the guy who's going to lead that team. It's going to be kind of him or bust as long as the defense holds their own, which I think they will. So, yeah, I think he could. Is he my Super Bowl pick? No, but would I be surprised if they won it all? No, I wouldn't really be surprised. I do want to jump on the Jacoby Brissett talk. Dude got paid out pretty good. I don't really think we need to get into the Andrew Luck conversation all that much. It's kind of been beaten like a dead horse at this point. I was kind of annoyed by my Twitter feed that was just 2 days after the news. I'm still getting like blasted on Twitter of Andrew Luck retired nonsense. Like, okay, we get it.
That's because you have douchebags like Doug Gottlieb and Dan Dockich.
Given those nonsensical takes that we just can't stand.
I mean,
but where that kind of makes it interesting to me is just the other day, Jacoby Brissett obviously steps in as a starting quarterback. He did so a couple years ago when Andrew Luck sat out the whole season. The man got paid, I think it was a 2-year contract, $30 million, 20 guaranteed. What do you think about Jacoby Brissett? Do you think he's good enough? Because, I mean, I think we both, before the Andrew Luck news came out, had the Colts going to the Super Bowl. Oh, yeah.
I was high on the Colts.
I mean, they really struggled early last season, like played like shit, had a terrible record, and then won like 9 out of 10 or 9 straight or something like that, made it to the playoffs. So, I mean, they got the pieces in place in a lot of areas. What do you think about Jacoby Brissett? Do you think he can fill those shoes of Andrew Luck and be able to lead them to the playoffs and if not further?
Not the shoes of Andrew Luck. I think he is a good quarterback, and I've actually read he fits pretty well with their offense they want to run. Unfortunately, they addressed their offensive line too late.
Right.
Evidence of Andrew Luck. But, Pro Football Focus has them ranked number 5th with that offensive line unit.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. If your offensive line is solidified, I mean, it just helps the offense cruise at times. So,
yeah. And I mean, in 2017, he played they played the whole season. He won a few games. He played solid. I looked up his stats the other day: 3,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 7 picks. Also ran for 4 touchdowns and 260.
And back in 17, their offensive line was atrocious.
Bro, he was sacked 52 times, which
Holy shit.
was ranked 31st most times sacked in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, that's
31st most
crazy.
ever.
It's crazy.
52 sacks is absurd. So, now that line is solidified, I think he can. I mean, even with that said, he still won 4 games. So I think he actually is a lot better than I think people realize. I think Chris Ballard kind of saw that and was deciding before he goes out and balls out in the first 8 games, and he had to pay him more. Let's get him locked in for the
right. No,
for
it was
the
a
30.
good move.
I like it a lot. I think they're going to win a lot of games. And one question that I wanted to have as we lead into our next topic is, what do you see as an outlook? I wanted to see your upside team and your downside team. I'm not sure if you got a chance to kind of look into this a little bit, but is there anything that you have on the top of your mind as we go into week 1 here tomorrow? By the time we get this posted, the Bears and Packers will most likely have, well, definitely, there's no way I'm getting this up tomorrow morning. They will have played. Hopefully we get it before Sunday, but with that being said, leading into week 1, what do you see as your upside team and downside team, or otherwise surprise that could kind of stand out, and a team that could really fall flat on their face that's getting talked up a lot?
A team that's getting talked up a lot.
So, maybe give you a little bit of time to think about it real briefly. So My upside team, I actually kind of the Colts to me are very appealing. That's kind of where it led into this next conversation. After the Andrew Luck, I looked it up, and Vegas has them at 7.5 wins. And I could easily see the Colts win 9 or 10 games. So I think they're going to go above their projection. They're going to be an upside team that people have gotten off of since Andrew Luck news broke. That's my upside team. Ty still a dog. Like you mentioned, that offensive line, they still got Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines. I can't ever pronounce that dude's name. Paris Campbell, I think, is gonna play well. Devin Funchess is there. Ebron and Doyle are gonna do good things. Their defense, Darius Leonard is a freak of nature and is going to be an All-Pro yet again. I think they're gonna go over their 7.5 wins and win 9, if not 10 games, and push for that playoffs. The Rams, in my opinion, are my downside team, or would be my downside team if they didn't get to play the Niners and the Cardinals twice every year. Vegas has them at 10.5 wins. They'll probably win 9 or 10. I'm not, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I'm just not that high on the Rams. But my downside team is the Baltimore Ravens. Vegas had them at 8.5 wins. If they win 6, I think
I'm not high on the Ravens either.
Lamar
they were
Jackson,
be my downside team.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson is the ultimate sophomore slump candidate that I've ever seen. Everybody kind of makes fun of him because he can't throw the ball, and I think it's warranted. I thought I was kind of high on Lamar Jackson a little bit coming out of the draft, but he hasn't shown me a damn thing. And, losing Pro Bowl safety and Eric Weddle, Zadarius Smith, who led the team in sacks last year. They lost C.J. Mosley, who was a 4-time Pro Bowler, and they lost Terrell Suggs. C.J. Mosley also being the leading tackler on that defense. They lose all those pieces. Yes, they get Earl Thomas, who, played 4 games last year and hasn't played 16 games since 2015.
Wow.
I don't really think that defense is going to be all that special.
What's
especially
crazy?
Losing those guys.
Pro Football Focus has their secondary ranked as the best
I don't understand
unit
how that's possible.
entering this season.
I'm not sure how.
Marlon Humphrey, Earl Thomas, Tony Jefferson, some notable names there.
Well, okay, Earl Thomas from 4 years ago? Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, he hasn't played 16 games since 2015.
He's still good, but I don't know. The Lamar Jackson offense that we saw last year just is not sustainable.
You don't lose 4 studs and just replace them with Earl Thomas and just become a dominant defense yet again. That paired with the fact that you have a guy who can only run the ball, I see the Ravens winning 6 games. And like I said, they're projected at 8.5. They don't get to play the Browns twice and win 2 games anymore. They do get the Bengals still, but the Browns aren't a walkthrough. So, that's my downside team. Do you have an upside team?
My upside team, just kind of scoping out these teams here, a couple come to mind, but really I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
Didn't make the playoffs last year. I don't think Matt Ryan sometimes gets the credit he deserves either at quarterback. Talk about poise and being able to deliver big throws. I mean, he's there with the best of them. So, I'm going with, I don't think the Falcons win their division, but it doesn't seem like they're that type that's getting a lot of hype.
Okay, yeah.
This year,
I mean, pulling it up right now, the Action Network has Atlanta Falcons at 8.5 wins. They have the over at -110 and the under at even. So
their division is brutal. I mean, good Lord.
They win 9 games. I think that'll be a good season for them. Yeah, the upside teams were tough because, a lot of teams were in that 8 win range from Vegas, 7.5 win range. There wasn't a lot of teams below that, so it was kind of hard, looking at it real quick. Teams that are 7 wins: Bills, Broncos, Jets, Colts at 7.5, Panthers at 7.5, Jags at 8 wins from Vegas, 49ers at 8, Titans at 8, Houston at 8.5. Like these teams, in my opinion, several downside teams out of those batch. I don't think a lot of those teams are going to win very many games. And then the teams that are below those 7 are all hot garbage. And I'm not picking the Lions, Bucks, Redskins, Bengals, Giants, Raiders, Cardinals, or Dolphins, who are all under 7 wins projected from Vegas. It was kind of hard to pick an upside team, but I'm going to go to the Colts. I think they're going to win 1.5 or more games above their projected Vegas total.
Yep. I like the Colts too.
Yeah, so, wrapping up real quick, just other week 1 things to look out for. I know you and I are both really excited for the Browns game. We'll both be there. I'm super pumped. That stadium is going to be electric. I'm going to try to get there as early as possible. I think you said you might be stepping foot on the field pregame. Hopefully that pans out.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Just real quick, what's your projections for the Browns week 1?
I think the Browns defensive line is going to feast on the Titans.
Feast. Eric Lewan?
No.
Taylor Lewan. That's it. Taylor Lewan being suspended for the first few games. That is a crushing blow for the Titans because
they have a decent unit.
Myles Garrett, bro. Myles Garrett is going to feast. Feast.
Yep.
Without Taylor Lewan lined up there at left tackle.
The Browns' defensive front is so talented.
Yeah, I think I told you a story via text the other day. I walked down to the pro shop from work, and I work downtown, and I was going to check out the jerseys and see what kind of they had in store. See the OBJ gear and stuff like that. And walking down Al Lerner Way, they had all the posters lined up on, along the road on little light poles or whatever have you. And just looking at all these faces, I just couldn't help but laugh at, holy shit, the Browns have all these players. The Cleveland Browns are for real, bro.
Right.
And I'm very excited. I know you are too. I cannot wait for Sunday. I know we got to do a recap. Like I said, we're going to try to do these every Tuesday, get recorded and posted every Thursday, if not sooner. We'll see how kind of quickly we can get it turned around. Maybe even record Tuesday, get them up Wednesday, or record Wednesday, get them up Thursday. I'm not really sure how that'll pan out. But we're going to do a lot of NFL preview week by week. We're going to recap some of the top stories. We're going to talk college football, obviously. We're going to get into some MLB postseason. Hopefully the Tribe can right the ship. I don't really see it really coming through.
They're fucked.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be pretty difficult for them to kind of pull it together at this point. But we'll probably get into a little bit of that. Probably less so if the Indians aren't in the postseason, just because I'll be pissed at the point that I don't really want to talk about it too much. But I definitely see it probably being more football focused here in the next several months, which I'm really excited for. And I'm excited to get this rocking and rolling and pumping out some episodes and making it happen.
Hell yeah. Football's back.
Let's
Week
go.
1, NFL tomorrow.
All right, brother.
My God.
So that wraps it up for episode 1 of the Call on the Field Stands podcast. Like I said, we're excited to get this rocking and rolling for the weeks and months to come. Ryan Denchef with Jeff Mapis. See you next time.